and welcome to Two Words Wolves Pod. I'm Ryan Eichten, and with me is Leo Sun. Leo, how you doing?
Doing all right, Ryan. It is officially April now. We're recording on Monday night, so University of Michigan just won their, I think, first championship since '89 or something like that. So, shout out to the college game. I know UCLA women's team also won for the first time in God knows how long. So, but that said, so NCAA is over. The G League is over for Iowa. They lost to the Stockton Kings in the first round, who I think the Stockton Kings are going to the championship round right now. I am repping my Iowa Wolves gear just to pour one out for them right now for you, Ryan, some Iowa gear for you. But meanwhile, the Timberwolves are just kind of idling. So I think for me, honestly, how I'm doing, I'm ready for the WNBA season. Free agency technically started today. They just had the expansion draft. The regular lottery draft or like new player draft is going to be a week away next Monday. So there's a lot of exciting stuff to look at outside of men's basketball right now.
Yeah, you're kind of coping with one team when you start focusing on another, I guess. Kind of did that at the end of the last WNBA playoffs, right? When the Lynx flamed out.
Yeah.
So we're potentially doing that the other way around here. But yeah, it's been a rough week for the Wolves. They've lost 3 in a row, 2 of the 3 without Anthony Edwards, none of which necessarily close or well played losses by the Wolves. And they've gone from, in the span of about a month and a half, or really just a month, but in the span of since like the first week of March, they went from the 3 seed all the way down to locked themselves into the not just like, because we talked about them trying to get home court advantage. Not only is that gone, with a full weekend left in the season, they've clinched out of that. It's been, I don't know how it's been as disappointing a regular season in probably since that first Rudy Gobert year, I think would be fair to say. It just, we'll dive into it in the pod more, but like at no point did this team ever just start ripping off, like, what was it? I mean, their longest win streak was 5 games, and their like best stretch of, like, they never won 9 out of 10. Like they never got going, not at any point. And so now we sit here with 4 games left, with the Wolves for the first time dealing with injuries all season, and it's just kind of like you look up and what is this team? I mean, I think we have a pretty good understanding about it, but like from like a night in, night out standpoint, like, I don't know. Like, I don't think you can really even know what you're going to get on a certain night from this Timberwolves team, and it's about as damning as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, you can save the whole, oh, well, their best attributes that they play up to the competition, they're a wild card. You never know. You never know what you're going to get with them. It's like, at this point, I mean, we're, like you said, there's only a handful of games left in the season, and the Wolves have really showed us who they are, at least this iteration of them. And I've kind of come, to reconcile the fact that, this is how it's going to be. I'm not going to expect them to go on a huge month and a half long hot streak to finish out, in the postseason here. But at the same time, I'm okay knowing that, hey, we're a good, just barely good team, and we're not a great team. There are certain games we are great teams, but great teams aren't great just for like 1 game at a time or 2 games at a time. So, it is what it is. I'm okay with it. We'll see what happens. Obviously, we know going to playoffs, it's a whole different game. The Wolves have proven that so much in the last 2 years. And so we'll see what happens this year again. I'm going to just try to enjoy the ride because it's been a very, very frustrating last week of basketball for sure.
Absolutely. It's been really a month, like I said, since they won a game at home against Toronto, one of their better performances of the season, to go 40-23. Since then, last 15 games, they're 6-9. Just not a record in any 15 game stretch associated with a team that's has the ability to really step it up in the playoffs, and especially damning during those 15 games. They're 27th 28th, third worst in offensive rating. The first howl or foul I put down here is that mostly due to injuries? Howl or foul?
I'm going foul on this one. And it pains me to say this, Ryan, because it feels like just a couple weeks ago I was talking about like we're playing fast and the offense is here. We got it. And just like that, they crater right back down. I posted this on Blue Sky as well too during the Hornets game on Sunday, and I was saying that I don't know, and you can fill me in, Ryan, if you know, but I'm not going to look up if other teams have as many possessions where they post up a player and he takes like three crab dribbles backwards, like it's the 1980s, just like backing guys down and then trying to make a last minute pass or like a little tough finish through like two or three dudes. I feel like the Wolves do that a ton. And, they just play at this slow grinding speed right now. You can chalk some of that up, like you said, to injury. One of the key cogs for the offense off the bench, Naz Reid, we'll talk about him later, but he's been kind of lost. And obviously, even when he did play in that game against the Sixers, it was like I do not know who that man was because he was passive. He was missing dunks. I mean, there was a lot of things going on there that I think is attributing to that. And the Wolves, again, like you said, this point in the season, they never really found consistency, even with their offense, even within single games. If you kind of use that as a microcosm, like one game, they'll play good offense for one, maybe two quarters, but then it just kind of tails off because they don't know really how to string it together. And they get back into their bad habits, like you said, like I said at the beginning, backing guys down, slowing the game down, trying to look for last minute grenade passes. It's extremely frustrating because as soon as Julius Randle gets in that mode or Naz Reid gets in that mode, we're like, all right, I think I have a mismatch. I'm gonna see how far I can back this guy up and try and put him under the rim. It's usually not a good result. Even if it is a good result where they do score or get fouled, it's just not conducive to the ball movement and the speed that normally we've seen them been able to play with, whether it's Io in the lineup, playing fast or, whatever the case is. So, yeah, I'm saying foul. I don't think that it is just due to injuries. I think it is an internal and habit problem for the Wolves.
Yeah, I'm going to go foul as well. Obviously, like, games are harder to win, points are harder to come by when you got guys out. Like, no one would argue that, like, it's not a difficult thing to try to do or makes things harder. But I think the recent stretch of injuries is a good litmus test for the season in this sense. Prior to basically, I mean, it's really just been Ant's been out for a good amount of time. I would assume it missed a couple games, and then now Jaden McDaniels has missed. It's been about a week now, and likely, almost certainly, will be out the rest of the regular season. And honestly, for both him and Ant, we don't know their injury statuses for the playoffs yet. It sounds like for both of those guys, the Wolves are optimistic, but both their injuries are not something that has like an easy timetable. Could like both of those guys could be ready tomorrow morning, or they could be way longer than anyone would take. But prior to those injuries, the Wolves were as healthy, if not the healthiest team in the league. And so I think if someone were to try to come up here and be like, well, they're just playing bad because of injuries. And again, I already said it. Like, it plays a factor. It absolutely does. But if that's the case, if 2 or 3 injuries over the course of a month can derail a team so thoroughly, then why didn't they win more games in the first half of the season when they were the healthiest team in the league? You can't heavily focus on your team's own injuries and ignore the fact that they were playing B squads for a lot of the first half. I just remember early on in the season, like, there was just so many nights where they'd go up against the team's best player or even lose or look sloppy, or like they lost a couple games to Memphis, or that they lost to, I mean, they lost to Utah and Chicago on back-to-back nights. Like, these were times where you were healthy and you should have stacked up wins, and you didn't. And now you're paying that price when you do kind of revert back to the mean of having a couple injuries for a month. I just think if you look on the whole, even taking into account who has missed games, have the Wolves had like an above average or below average health this season? I would say at worst it's been league average, and I would probably say it's been above average. And certainly when you look at the teams above them in the standings. And I know I've been comparing them to Oklahoma City in this a lot. Personally, because I believe, like, it's not that they were championship or bust, but at the very least, the goal for this season was to like look back at the end and be like, if XYZ broke right, we could have won the title. And so in that sense, I'm going to at least at some level judge you to Oklahoma City. And Oklahoma City has been terribly unhealthy this entire season. Like, their second or third best player, Jalen Williams, has basically missed the entire year. Like, guys like Caruso and Hartenstein have been out, and they got 16 more wins than you. The Spurs have been relatively healthy Wemby's been in and out of the lineup just like Ant has, but everyone else has been healthy. But like also they haven't even been to the playoffs and they're 14 wins above you. Denver is 5 wins above you at this point, and they have had half a roster the entire season. And when Jokic went out, they played some of their best basketball of the year. The Lakers, who we'll talk about later, but I mean, certainly for this last week of the season, are going to be incredibly depleted. But like Reeves missed time, Luka missed time, LeBron missed time. They never, and they still have more wins than the Wolves by a good margin. Houston has had basically the entire season, their starting point guard and starting center out the entire year. And they have more wins than the Wolves. Like I'm not here for the injury excuse because again, it matters. It like to say it's just as easy to win games without Ant would be a lie. But they needed to stack up wins when they were the healthiest team in the league, and they didn't. And that is probably the most damning thing about this team. We all know their ceiling. We all have seen it. But the fact that they've hit that so seldom this regular season, I think is just a gigantic indictment of this team. And we'll wait for this discussion until after the playoffs. But I don't know how else you view it as other than like the roster just maybe beyond the roster needs to change too.
Yeah, it certainly feels a little bit like a swan song of this season, of this iteration of the Wolves. Not to say again, who knows what happens, like you said, during the summer, but feels like they're kind of petering out here. Whether it's Randall or whether it's Naz or whatever the case is, I mean, it feels like the Wolves are just kind of like spinning their tires at this point. And we used excuse early on. We've used multiple excuses. Early on was that the Wolves are waiting for the playoffs. They're waiting for the big matchup. And they're just bored of the regular season. Well, I mean, they certainly look like they're playing bored right now because it is not good basketball right now. And so I do agree with you. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Anything can happen in the playoffs, but you can't. We're past the point of just excuses of like, oh well, if this or if that, or oh well, it was a trade deadline. And so Randall and Jaden were kind of not fully in it, or oh well, we just got Io and Mike was out of the lineup, so we had to change it. It's like every team has this. And I think for those of you who are listening who are just only Wolves fans and really don't watch other NBA games outside of the Wolves, it makes it feel like, oh, well, we're the only ones that is hitting this adversity, whether it's injuries or, trade rumors or whatever the case. But that's not true. Like Ryan, you mentioned, like all the other teams have had a huge amount of injuries. They've had a lot of roster shakeups. They've made, trade deadline moves as well, too. So the Wolves are not the only one, but they managed to navigate it a bit better. Now, again, I say that on the other side of the coin is that we're also not like as lost as maybe some of the other teams further down in the standings, like maybe like the Clippers or I mean the Suns are having a better season than most, but like what is their path forward as well too. And so it's not to say that we're completely doomed. I don't get into that doomer bit of it. I do get frustrated like many Wolves fans do, and there probably will be changes, but for the meantime they are what they are.
I just think that this team needs, like we've already seen what they can do in the playoffs. I would argue that the past 2 postseasons they have leveled up in the playoffs. Obviously, 2 seasons ago they had a really good regular season, but the past 2 regular seasons have not been good enough. And I've been toying with this idea is like we talk a lot about like the effort and the attention to detail and like that level of stuff. And I do think from a lot of players on this roster that is something that desperately needs to change. I also just kind of think that's been used as an excuse by us, by the players, by everyone, as like a masking agent for like straight up maybe this team just isn't very good. And it's not actually about effort. It's not actually about any of these soft factors. It's just like this team is just not very good. And and I don't fully buy into that as well. I think it's a mix of everything. That they do have this extra gear that they can get to. They do have, I don't know, but like I just think for next year, like there has to be like the next couple of years are going to be about winning a championship. I felt like that like this year was the start of that, but it doesn't appear like that's trending. But like if they weren't in championship or bust now with a 25-year-old Anthony Edwards next season, they are. It's time. It's all the dilly-dallying is over. All the like Ant didn't take X Games seriously. And to that point, one of the games that started off this, Luka Doncic just came in and roasted you. Kawhi Leonard went in and roasted you. Those are 2 of the best players in the NBA. If you're not gonna quote unquote get up for those guys, then like then there's like two. It's like just Denver and Oklahoma City. That's not at all sustainable. And so next season and the year beyond, it's like going to be about winning a championship. And to do that, even if they win out and get to 50 wins, like 50 wins is not like a championship team. Like I kind of scrolled through it. Like most championship teams win like 60 games. And can you like even 2 seasons ago, the Wolves didn't really get all that close to 60 games. Like there's just like a whole nother level this team needs to hit. And I have somewhat faith that like Ant will get there, especially in the playoffs, but even from a regular season standpoint, like I said, being 28th in offense in a 15 game span, even with your best player in and out of the lineup, is just like, that's a bad sign. That's one of those signs where, I don't know, when you're thinking about changes beyond just the roster, that's probably a big sign of like the Wolves. It doesn't feel like the Wolves have like a set offensive game plan that they rely on even when guys are out of the lineup. It's so dependent on Ant and Julius and Jaden to go out and make plays. And that's great. Those are extraordinarily talented players. And Naz when he's playing well as well. But like, I think like the offensive, how they run offense needs to change. Their personnel needs, like this team just needs a reset in a lot of different ways. And I think everyone knows like that is coming this offseason, because I think it's fair to say like they made it to the West Finals a couple years ago. Maybe they were close to championship ready then, those type of teams, but like right now they are miles behind a lot of these teams. And I guess that's the one thing I'm excited for at the playoffs is either they do flip that switch and we have another awesome playoff series, or we are my thoughts that this team is miles away get confirmed.
Yeah, my last thought on this is, you can call it, I'm just huffing too much of that copium, but at some point I do try to think at a wider level lens where, let's just say we're 15 years in the future now, or even say 20 years in the future, and Ant's retired and he's not here, or he's traded, or whatever the case is. We can think back about this time and like, how was it? Like, how close were we really? And how much is it like, man, we really missed out on that chance, versus like, hey, look, we gave it the best go that we could. We overachieved in some ways. We made it fairly far. I mean, 2 conference finals. I mean, some teams don't even sniff that, in their entire franchise existence. And so like, what if, let's just say again, that what if Ant's floor is going to be an Allen Iverson, a Reggie Miller, Vince Carter, whatever, where it's like, oh yeah, I mean, these are extremely, extremely talented players. Maybe even win an MVP, maybe even get to the finals once, but just couldn't get over that hump. Would I be disappointed? Like, man, like that sucks. Like, no. I mean, you think Pacers fans, regret how great Reggie Miller was for the team or Allen Iverson was for the team? It's like, no. I mean, like obviously they wish they could have won, but they still love that time in their era of their franchise. And so that's like probably the floor for Anthony Edwards, which is great. Best case scenario, he supersedes that. He levels up past that. And so again, I try not to get too like, all right, well, this is it. This is gonna suck. Ant's gonna request for a trade to go to Atlanta, and it's all over. It's like, no, I mean, there's still a lot of things to see this season. Now, when you kind of are looking at it game by game, yeah, it can be a little depressing, but I try to zoom out a little bit and kind of take that approach sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think you bring up a good point about like this level of player that Ant just needs to get to. And this season is a good example. And it's been his most injury prone season. So it's fair to take that into account. But like there's just like this level of guy, like the people you mentioned are exactly right. Allen Iverson, Patrick Ewing, even like James Harden, Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, Chris Paul. Like these are unbelievably like those are all top like 50 greatest players ever. And if Ant, to the idea that if Ant ended up being one of the Russell Westbrook is probably a good comparison for this of the modern day, as well as Harden. Like if he ends up being that good, which I think he's probably still on pace for, like that's an incredible player. But it's also like it's not going to be good enough if he's the best player on this team to win a title. And so I think about that in terms of like the awards voting, or just like there's a top 4 in this league right now that are just so much better than Ant, at least in terms of the regular season. Like the seasons Jokic, Wemby, Luka, and SGA have had are just like, I remember I feel like I talked about this with you. Like the Wolves were going to be a title team. It was because Ant was going to be in conversations with that level of player closer than the teams, closer than where he was last year, which was the last guy off of first team, the first guy in the second team. And that's, he's going to miss out on all NBA because of games, but like he wasn't going to make first team this year. And maybe he would have if he played 70 games instead of like 65 or 75, whatever. He was going to finish nowhere near, he probably wouldn't get a single top 4 MVP vote. And I just like, that's also the next level. And it's the thing about this team I'm like least worried about is Ant hitting that next level. I just assume he will. But it's also like the consistency night to night that this whole organization I don't think has really shown the past 2 regular seasons, and really going back to November of 2023. They had the best month, most wins in a regular season month, and then they played like a 50-win team the rest of the year. I think certainly that team had more consistency than this one, but like they really haven't been able to find that mojo since then. And I think roster changes will help, but I do think like there's just some sort of internal vibe around this team that needs to switch. And it's totally understandable how that's not like quantified or whatever. But like that's the feeling I get. It's like something somewhere needs to change. And I know people are going to point at the coach. I don't think that that's unfair necessarily. I also think it would be scapegoating that coach pretty a lot for maybe I would more point to roster deficiencies and the players on the actual roster as the reason this season has gone south.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things to point to for sure. And there's a lot of things to think about going into the future. But let's get back to this season at hand right now. One of the players that, speaking of struggles, is Naz Reid. He's once again scored just 6 points, most recently on 3 of 15 shooting. And so our next topic here is how or foul. This is the version of Naz Reid we should expect to see in the playoffs.
I'll go foul. His recent stretch of play is certainly concerning, and I thought the game against Charlotte was probably one of his worst, where he was just couldn't get anything to fall. Layups, misses, was forcing stuff. The 3-point shot was way off, and I'm sure to a
He
certain
biffed a
extent his
dunk
shoulder.
too.
Yeah, that was rough as well. Um, I'm sure his shoulder is bothering him. Finch was asked about it after the game, and he basically said he'll have to go ask Nas. I think that signals that obviously there could be like pain there or an injury, but there's no like acute injury. I mean, look, he's not being listed on the injury report. So I think a lot of it is mental too. Like I think he's just in his own head a lot. So I do think with the week off for the playoffs, assuming they they hold off Phoenix, which is still by far the most likely thing that'll happen. I think that should be able to reset him. He should be able to get back to what we've seen from him in the past. But yeah, right now it's brutal.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with foul. Well, actually, opposite to you. I'm going Howell on this. I do think that this is a version of Naz Reid that we're going to see in the playoffs. Unfortunately, Naz has never really traditionally been a playoff riser. I was looking at his playoff numbers compared to regular season on the per 100 possessions. And everything, all his box score numbers go down except for 3-point percentage just by smidge and his free throw percentage by smidge. But all the other numbers just kind of all go down just a little bit. And that's, I don't want to say that's okay, but that's kind of who he is. And so I don't think that come playoff time, it's like, oh, well, he's gonna be like Ant, where he just like levels up to this whole other level or something like that. I think because of how banged up we are, he's forcing himself to play through things, injuries, nooks, emotional, whatever it is that he's going through, he's pushing through, and like it's admirable. He's showing grit, and I can appreciate that grit. That's the thing that you can never question about Nas. Like, is he tough? No, he's tough. Like that's not a thing that he isn't. But I wouldn't be surprised if like he's going to get worse than he is right now, health wise. He's playing hard as usual, and he's not 100%. And what happens that it's getting compounded that because he's playing so hard, he's 100%. He's falling more. He's getting hung on the rim, and like that does not feel good on your shoulder. I've tried to dunk on little like 8-foot hoops before and gotten hung. That hurts. Okay, and so for him to fall down so much, and all that, I do think he's going to get worse. I feel like a part of Naz's struggles is what Finch and Mike Conley said most recently in the locker room media availability. that the team is full of a lot of emotional players, and Naz is one of those emotional players. When he gets mad, he gets upset, or he's missing shots, he's frustrated, he just starts chucking them up. There was a play against, I believe it was the Hornets, or maybe it was the Sixers. It was one of these last two losses where he goes into the lane and he, kind of backs down a little bit, tries to throw up like a hook shot. Before that shot goes up, I believe the ball gets dislodged from him, and then he kind of picks it back up. And he takes another dribble and he tries to throw it up, and he misses. And he's called for, I think, a double dribble in that. And he's arguing with the ref, like, no, what? Like, the ball got hit, it shouldn't have been a double dribble. And then when you go back and watch that play, there was a very obvious, even to me, which, like, I don't consider myself like a film geek or nerd. There's a very easy pass out when he got the ball back to Kyle that would have kicked out to hockey assist to Io in the corner for a three. Like, that is very obvious. There's four defenders all in the paint sagging off the 3-point line. And Naz, after he got the ball smacked out of his hands, instead of passing out for the easy play, he forced up a tough shot that got called for a travel. And he was arguing when it's like, dude, you're lucky they blew that play dead, because if they didn't, that would have been an easy it was a Hornets. It would have been a transition score for the Hornets had they not blown that dead. And I isolate that sequence because I feel like that is Naz in his emotions. Naz frustrated and annoyed and being like, instead of making the right play, I want to get myself going. And he does that oftentimes, like taking tough threes. And again, when it goes in, it's great. But the way the Wolves are playing right now, they can't live with that. They need him to be a ball mover. They need him to be more efficient on that end. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he does play like this, if not worse, come the playoffs. Unfortunate.
Yeah, and I guess we'll just have to see what it looks like when they have time off or when they get Ant back. But right now, it's just been incredibly rough, like you mentioned, and you hope that I don't know, that they can turn it around quickly, which is something that they've done in the past. But I guess topic 3 I had, Howl or foul. Should the regular season be considered a disappointment?
I'm going with Howl for this one. And I say disappointment because it was based on, our word on early season expectations. Like, I think both you and I thought we'd for sure be a top 4 team. And I think there's been some teams that have underperformed, just like we have. Injuries, just kind of lack of cohesion. I mean, Denver, Houston were supposed to be these buzzsaws, and meanwhile, Houston can't seem to play offense. Denver can't seem to play defense. And they both, I would say, they probably feel like they underperformed as well too. You have some overperformers. I think San Antonio overperformed what many people thought. I thought the Spurs would be good. The Lakers for sure have been overperforming, but you know where they are now. So all that said, I feel like there's no reason why Minnesota, with their continuity and with their health for the majority of the season, shouldn't have fallen off as much as they are. And yeah, a top 6 seed and the West is nothing to sneeze at, but you kind of alluded to it, Ryan. The Wolves are not out of the play-in yet. Now everything has to go completely wrong for them to end up in the play-in. But still, the fact that we have a handful of games left and that's still a threat, that for sure is a disappointment. So yeah, overall, I would say the season's a disappointment, regular season, but the playoffs, hopefully, that won't be a disappointment. But I don't have my hopes up right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Howl. I don't know how else you could put it. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, like we all know that they're gonna, like, this potential Wolves Nuggets series that it feels like we're barreling towards, I think is gonna be an awesome series, and I would still be pretty surprised if it ended before 6 games. I think it's gonna be incredibly competitive, and the Wolves will have a half decent shot at winning it. Vegas will probably disagree. I'm sure Vegas will put the Nuggets as huge favorites, and I should probably add that's assuming Ant and Jaden are relatively close to 100%. If either of them are out or in and out of the lineup, then I would totally change my tune to that. So it's like, we know they have this ceiling. We know how good they can be. And we just, through 78 games of the season, how many games do you feel like they showed, like, oh, here we go. This is the team that can do XYZ. Right. Probably like single digits at most.
For sure. Like, yeah, definitely single digits. I would agree with you.
Like the 2 Oklahoma City wins,
Boston,
just a couple San Antonio wins, the one Denver win.
Boston.
Boston. There's a game right before Christmas against the Knicks at home that I thought was pretty solid. I would even throw in
at that point. Yeah, we're kind of reaching at this point now, right?
Where I would throw in the recent wins against Boston and Houston, without Ant. Obviously, like that changes what is considered a good game, and but there hasn't been many. And then I mentioned the Toronto win. at the beginning of March. But like they just even like 2 seasons ago, I thought we saw it, or last season, I thought we saw it more, like the peak of that team, and certainly down the stretch of that season, they were healthy and playing well, and maybe that's something that like we should like they're going to end up with a similar amount of wins as last year, and especially, and I would be confident if they weren't seemingly locked into the 6th seed. I think like Ant might play an extra game or two down the stretch, or like what have you, but like maybe this is just a carbon copy of last season, except instead of the injury spot being in the middle of the season as it was last year, it's just at the end of the season. And so to me, and that's kind of what I believe, is that they will play to a similar level in the playoffs this year than they did last year. That would be my guess as of right now, which means they could very easily beat Denver. They could probably even possibly beat San Antonio. The problem is I think what last year also proved is they weren't really that close to winning the Western Conference. And so that's why I would say the regular season is let down, because my expectations, if you gave me a relatively healthy season, which I don't know, is given Ant missed the bulk of the games, maybe you can debate it wasn't. I just think like you look at up and down, like you mentioned, the teams that they've recently been fighting for, Lakers, Rockets, and Nuggets, like those teams have all been more injured than you. So I don't think it's really an excuse. So yeah, 46 wins with 4 to play. Not a positive regular season.
Before we move on, I do want to ask you, okay, yeah, we've been kind of, negging out here on the Wolves for good reason. But was there anything that was a disappointment for you this season? Like, for example, I will say, ownership bringing Kevin Garnett back into the fold, that has not been a disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Picking up, righting the ship on Rob Dillingham and turning that into Ayo Dosunmu, of sorts, that's not a disappointment. Those are two good things for sure that I feel like long-term wise, I'll remember like, oh yeah, that happened this season. That was cool.
Yeah, there hasn't been many. I will say that, just because but I think just from a bigger picture sense, like they're going to make the playoffs for the 5th straight season. Like that is something, and like I believe they'll have a competitive series against Denver that'll be a fun series. Like these are the type of stuff that we would have killed for. But previously, even during the the first year with Rudy, or the season that ended against Memphis, like we would have killed for a season like this not that long ago. So I think it's important to appreciate that. The Houston, the recent Houston win was probably one of the nuttier nights at Target Center
Yeah.
that I've encountered. So like that's fun, and I mean, I always enjoy covering this team, whether they're good or bad. So I appreciate that, but there have the lows have been far lower than the highs have been high,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
they've ended a couple of cool, like, droughts, as long time droughts as well too, right? I mean, granted, yeah,
Yeah,
the big
the
scheme, it
wins
doesn't really
in
mean anything, but yeah,
Toronto
Toronto and
and Boston
Boston,
are probably a
yeah,
good.
it's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, at least. So.
Exactly. All right, last howl or foul here. We've already touched on it a lot, but we'll put it our names on an opinion here. Howl or foul, the Wolves can turn it around. I think I'll straddle the fence here. I'll say howl, in the sense of I think they're not going to look like this in the playoffs. I think the season wide team that's going to win 48-ish games, that has a quote unquote flip the switch mentality, I think will show up. But foul, in terms of like this team was supposed to be better than last year's team, so that you could have a better chance of winning an extra playoff round. And like, I don't think they're going to turn that around 78 games into the season. So what do you think, Leo?
Yeah, I'm kind of like you. It's kind of both sides of it. My initial reaction and answer is that I wrote down was how I do think they can and will turn it around this season. How long that lasts is the real question, because honestly, when I was writing and I was thinking about this question, prepping for our episode, I was thinking, feels like it's been at least 5 times this season that we've been like recording on Two Words Wolves Pod and saying this is a low point of the season. And I was like, probably at least 5 times. I went back and I looked at it. This is the 5th time, because the first time we felt this way was late November. We had those 2 epic losses to the Kings and the Suns that were like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, what is this? This has to be the low point, blowing these 2 games. And then they kind of turned it around. A month later, late December, they blew the Christmas game, which is like, oh man, that was kind of a punch in the nuts. But then not only that, they get robbed by the Nets and the Hawks. We're like, oh, what
Mhm.
is this? Now we're losing to teams that aren't even really that competitive. And then they turn it around. 1 month later, number 3, late January, we go on that 5-game skid that you mentioned, including the Utah and Chicago losses. Surely it cannot get worse than this 5-game losing streak. This is the lowest point of the season. No, it's not. Because the next time, the 4th time, is mid-March, where we had lost 3 games in a row
I
by
think
an
there's one
average.
more. I think there's one
Yeah,
more in there. I think
they,
they lost to New Orleans and the
they,
Clippers at home, and the Clippers loss was by $1 billion, and they lost to Memphis the week prior. I think that was another low point. But
Sure.
yeah,
Okay.
keep
We'll
going.
throw that in there. We'll throw that in there. All right. So number 5, I would say mid March, where the Wolves lost 3 games in a row by an average of 22 points. One of which I went to was the LA game where they got absolutely destroyed there. So we're like, oh my gosh, the Wolves are not even competitive. Guys are starting to get kind of banged up. What is going on? This has to be a low point. And then now the 5th or AKA 6th time that they've been the worst is right now. We're in a current 3-game losing streak with just injuries about. Everyone's hurt. We're about to go into the postseason, and we are in a rut. So it feels like this is technically the 6th time that we felt like this is the lowest point of the season. So all that said, Ryan, I do feel like we've turned it around. If we've got to low point 6 times, meaning we've turned it around 5 times. So if we can turn it around again one more time, I think they can. But, health providing, like you said. But there's no reason to think that this team will just implode again within a few weeks. Because, yes, unfortunately, they could turn around in the playoffs, but the playoffs does not last for just 1 week. The playoffs last for almost a month. So it's
2
going to be a
months.
long season. So
Yeah, like like I'm always sample size is like that's my biggest thing. And so it's like we've seen what this team is. And so like the idea that like here's a good example is like basically in the playoffs, if you want to win the title, you got to go play really good basketball for 2 straight months. The Wolves haven't put together 3 weeks of good basketball, not to mention 8 months, or 2 months, 8 weeks. Like that's like to me, that will be the moment that I like click into there. Anytime Ant's gonna be on the roster, there isn't gonna be like a single playoff series where I go like, oh, they're screwed out of this one. But like until they put together in the regular season like a multi-month stretch of like, whoa, here we go, like what the Lakers did before their guys got hurt, what
Sure.
Denver's doing now. I think they've won 8 in a row. What Oklahoma City and San Antonio have done basically all year. And like a good example is like Houston has not done that. And it's like, well, that's why when the Lakers were healthy, like the 4 teams I just mentioned were the top 4 teams to win the Western Conference, and the Rockets and Wolves weren't. So I don't know. I think people have gotten in this mindset a little bit where like the regular season doesn't matter for the NBA, right? Because like, and to a certain extent, that's true. I just think like I almost swing the opposite. It's like who a team is in the regular season tells you about 90% of what they are going to be in the playoffs. So that is not a positive sign for the Wolves, but I'm like just broken record, beat it down on this as well. It's going to be a fun playoff series. It's going to be a fun playoffs even after potentially when the Wolves get eliminated. I think like, let's say the Wolves do play Denver and lose in the first round, that Denver San Antonio series is going to be insane.
Yeah.
The winner of that series facing Oklahoma City is going to be incredibly fun. The Eastern Conference, assuming the top 4 teams in that conference win and Cade is healthy for Detroit, all 3 of those series, like the two second round series and the East Finals will be awesome. And then hopefully the NBA Finals hopefully we get a better NBA Finals than the past 2 seasons that we've had. But yeah, anything else? Any more negative, Leo, before we kind of shift into the positive for a little bit?
Negative will be we see the Charlotte Hornets in the NBA Finals. We have to watch Miles Bridges and LaMelo Ball play basketball with high stakes on the line. But no, I agree with you. Yeah, no matter what, I think if you adjust your expectations a little bit, you just assume, the Wolves are coming in the 6th seed. They're the underdogs. And then so be it. Let them be the underdogs, play the underdogs again against the Nuggets and see what happens. If we treat it like we're on found money at that point, then, hey, I'm all for it, even if we lose in the first round. All right, well, we were supposed to lose, right? We were the 6th seed. We had a bad season. So, but if we win, then that's like, all right, we beat the odds again. So.
Absolutely. All right, let's move into Apex Alpha. Who is the leader of the pack this week? Slim pickings, unfortunately. I'm going to go Bones Highland, who just continues to play awesome basketball, especially when Ant is out of the lineup. And Yeah, he's been like the scorer off the bench the Wolves have needed for a while. I would assume he obviously fits into that as well. And you mentioned it to go back what you said. Positive of the season, I think, would be getting off of the sunk cost of Rob Dillingham and getting assuming they re-sign him in the offseason, getting a piece that'll be on your team for the next couple of years, and I think could be a big part of like the change that I feel needs to happen. I think Io would be a gigantic part of that, and someone of if you are looking to shake up the roster, Io would be someone that you would potentially look to like to keep carried over into the new version. But yeah, Bones Highland just doing everything. I think his defense has been better than anyone could have expected. Signing a 2A last year and then joining the full-time roster this year. Yeah, it's just been awesome. Has been in a stretch where they can't score. The Wolves can't. His offense has been basically just invaluable as they don't really have many other guys that can put the ball in the basket.
Yeah, I love your pick with Bones. In my notes for the last two games against Philly and against Charlotte, also my only positive notes is Bones Highland against the Sixers game. I mean, I wrote like Bones goes on a personal 8-0 run to lead the Minnesota Timberwolves back in front in the second quarter against Charlotte. My notes: Bones has a great second quarter again. It's just even I think one of the craziest plays was I think the game was already starting to get out of hand against the Sixers, but he had this like one-on-one sequence against VJ Edgecombe, and Bones is on defense, and VJ just kind of blows by him, and Bones gets like this miracle strip from behind, and then he goes back the other way, hits a huge three, and it brings the Wolves kind of back in it. And so yeah, he absolutely has been like one of the reasons the Wolves haven't absolutely sunken into a huge hole in the first half of these games. So yeah, I love your pick of Bones. I was gonna go with Ayo Dosunmu again for a fourth time, but I'm gonna change it up a little bit. My Apex Alpha is none other than Mike Connolly. Mike has played over 20 minutes in the last two of the last three games. He didn't play in one of those games against I think it was the Sixers, but he's knocked down 50% of his shots. Which, if you listen to one of our episodes of Two Words Wolves Pod, say like in January or December, Mike, if you told me Mike was shooting 50%, I'd be like, you're fucking with me. Like that can't be true. Mike has hit 50% of his shots, including 7 of 12 from distance. I'm not saying that we need to play Mike even more. In fact, he's probably played a little too much, but if he's hitting his shot and he's being a valuable player out there, he's been playing really tough on defense as well too. Last two games, he's had to chase around Duncan Robinson, LaMelo Ball, Con Kneppel, and he's been doing a great job fighting around those, those screens and those handoffs. And so, I love to see that. Again, like I said, I don't think this is indicative of what his role will be in the playoffs. I mean, who knows with the injuries, maybe he will have to play a lot. Hopefully not. But it's good to see Mike getting out there and being a positive on the court, because we always know how much of a positive he is off the court.
Yeah, Mike's recent stretch of play has been really good to see. Like you mentioned, I don't know how much it'll carry over into the playoffs, if at all, but it's been good to see him out there. I do think he has probably more in the tank than he's shown. Not to say that he should be like permanently in the rotation for whoever if he's on a playoff team next year, but I think if he's interested in coming back, I think there'd be a role for him on the Wolves in terms of what basically what we've seen since the deadline, since he's come back. Like a role where if guys are out, he's in the lineup, he's providing great locker room leadership, not the full Joe Ingles experience, right? But like someone that knows they're going to be in and out of the lineup, but could provide solid leadership off the bench. Where Michael want to find a role where he can play more. I'm not sure what that'll be, but at least he's knocking down 3-pointers. That's been the weirdest part of his season, that just the 3-point shot has completely gone away from him. So it's been good to see him knock down those. Let's go on to Prey of the Week. Who do the Wolves make their prey? Again, slim pickings. The Wolves did not. I just put the fans on the internet because I have seen some wild takes on there. Apparently on Andrew Dukowitz's show, he asked his listeners and then put out on X later if the Wolves would be better off losing in the first round or losing in the Western Conference Finals in 7 games. And I commented like, the answer is Western Conference Finals, and I think it's kind of insane if you pick the other way. I get what people are saying. I get that like change needs to happen, but like people, they see what you see. They do this for a living. the Wolves, short of winning the title, I really believe this will have massive changes. And the best thing for this type of team is just to get playoff reps. The more you can see about everyone in the playoffs, the better. I mean, we saw it from like Rudy and Randall last year in the playoffs. They had good series and bad series, and I think you learn a lot about what these guys can do around each other. So just making more rounds is the best, and then like just like I get the like wanting a new coach thing, but like so many of their issues, I don't think fall on Finch, especially like the effort stuff. I continue to like if you need your coach in the NBA to motivate you, like that's just not on the coach. It's just not. There's plenty of other things to rip Finch for, and I do think that like I mentioned with change, like everything should be looked at in terms of switching it up in the offseason. That'll start with the head coach. It's not to say I think he should be fired or that that'll be the best decision. I just think it's like worth evaluating. And if and when the season ends, like that'll be something we do. But like for now, there's 4 games left in the season. Finch is their coach, and to say that he's a terrible coach is just up and wrong. So like, yeah, I think that this Wolves team has driven their fans nuts, and maybe us media bloggers as well.
Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't go with themselves again for the third time
Yeah, I
this
could have.
season. But no, I agree with you. There's been some wild takes, and it brings out these losses bring out the worst in everyone. You talk about the Finch being a terrible head coach take. Like I was just talking in a group chat about this, and I almost have it in me to try and write a piece about this on Canis Hoopus about why fans and social media take to like fire the coach first. And I get it. Like, they're Finch is not a perfect coach. It's not like, oh, he's infallible. But at the same time, like when fans are watching games or seeing players like, oh man, like, that's a bad shot he made or he took, or that's a bad defensive sequence, or he didn't rebound the ball well. Like they can get mad at the players, but it's easy for a fan to be like, well, these are like huge dudes, world-class athletes. I could never do that. So I understand why it's hard for them. They look at the coach and they'd be like, oh, well, this guy, he didn't call a timeout earlier. Or, what's up with this substitution? Or they're not running the play that I think I want them to run. Even if you played organized basketball, understand play calling. And so as a result, fans are like, I could do what that guy does standing around not doing anything because they don't see what happens in practice. They don't see what happens in film. They don't see what happens behind the scenes a lot of the times and the conversations in the sidelines. And so as a result, they're like, you know what? We need a new coach because this guy doesn't seem to be doing anything. And so it's frustrating to me because there are fans who legitimately believe that they are an NBA level head coach or evaluator where they say like, all right, this guy is not it. And I know why. So anyways, that's kind of my soapbox about that. I'll move on to my prey of the week. My prey of the week is the Los Angeles Lakers. And any opportunity I can to trash the Lakers is one that I will take gladly. And I say the Lakers because the Wolves, as we know, are currently hurting with injuries. Despite some of the injuries and Ant coming back to play, just a few minutes, they trashed the Mavs by 30 points, basically, literally a week ago. And the Lakers, who now are also littered with injuries, stole the headlines with losing 2 of their main guys. But you know what? They got to play the Mavericks even though they were injured. And guess what? They essentially lost wire to wire to the Dallas Mavericks at one point where they were down 22 points. So yeah, I mean, the Lakers, they're sending Luka to Europe allegedly for some super soldier syndrome or whatever it is that he needs, while Houston and Denver and Minnesota are literally just praying that the matchup falls with the Lakers in the first round. So they've kind of turned into, it's easy to dump on the Wolves for not playing well and, they're hurt. But I mean, look at the Lakers. I mean, they're the ones that everyone's kind of like dumping on right now. And, I would hate to be a Laker fan if I were them. So.
Yeah, and that brings us into our last topic here of just looking at the standings again, looking at the playoffs matchup, and I think this is a good example of just wait on some of this stuff because last week Danny and I did a pod. In the last segment we did was talking about who the Wolves rather play in the playoffs, and we had a nice debate of Lakers or Nuggets or who do they want. And just like 24 hours later, that conversation is totally void of meaning because Luka goes down and now Reeves is out too. And the playoff matchup the Wolves would want is incredibly obvious with the Lakers. Unfortunately, it doesn't. The Wolves are going to have a pretty big what if at the end of the season, I think, because the Nuggets are now a half game up on the Lakers. It is in the win column, so if the Lakers do win out their last 4 games, they will get that 3 seed. But I did look up on the sports books who is the odds-on favorite to get the 3 seed. The Nuggets after winning tonight are minus 1,500 favorites to get the 3 seed. What that means is if you want to win $100, you have to put down 1,500. So you're betting 15 times your payout on that. So implied odds of like 90+%. So they and a lot of that is like there's a lot of vig in that number, so it's not quite that high, but like the people in Vegas are very confident that the Nuggets are going to be the 3 seed, and if those odds are high, the Wolves are much more likely to be the 6 seed. So it seems like we're trending towards a Nuggets Wolves first round. I mean, if the Wolves make the finals, they're going to earn it because like it appears like we're going. The Wolves' path to finals is at Nuggets, at Spurs, at Thunder. I mean, that's just impossible. No team, even the like the 97 Bulls would have trouble. The 98 Bulls would have trouble getting through that gauntlet. So, on the flip side, if the Wolves had won a couple more games and been able to pass Houston, they would have been able to. It's not over yet. The Lakers could still get the 3 seed, but like the Wolves don't even have an opportunity to like try to finagle the standings to get up to the Lakers and get a first round series with basically a bye almost, and instead they're playing one of the best players I've ever seen in Jokic. So I feel bad for the Lakers. It just in more like their players and their staff and all those people that don't have the generational the fans. Yeah, not them, but like like the people that put their lives and their careers for this stuff. They were playing really good basketball and their season just kind of dies. Assuming that like Luka and Reeves are out for most of the first round, but it seems like that's the path that's going. But yeah, I think I tweeted this out, but like it's time to mentally start preparing, especially tonight after they almost lost to Portland. Denver did, and didn't. It's time to mentally start preparing for a matchup with the Nuggets, excuse me. But then, although maybe I'm still being premature, and if the Lakers somehow go out and beat the the Thunder tomorrow, then the Lakers would go right back into a possible 3 seed fight. So probably still too early, but at the very least, you got to mentally prepare a greater than 50% chance that the Wolves will be playing the Nuggets in the first round.
Yeah, I know we don't have a full video component with our pod right now, but when Ryan said, I feel bad for the Lakers for their season dying to injuries, I had the biggest smile on my face when he was saying that. I don't know what I want anymore, Ryan. I don't know what I want. I mean, on one hand, like you kind of outlined, not playing the Lakers is, one thing because we're not getting the potentially easier matchup and the opportunity to potentially sweep them, which I would eat up like for even more than I did last year. It's like, oh, we're hurt. Oh, well, too bad. Sam Cassell hurt his hip doing a big balls dance and we would have beat you in the Western Conference Finals, right? Like, too bad. But at the same time, I mean, playing the Nuggets, if we lose, it will be like, quote unquote, like I said earlier, the Nuggets were the higher seed. They were the better team anyways. And like I also said, I feel like the Wolves play better as the underdogs. I mean, would anyone want to actually confidently tell me that, hey, the Wolves are going into a playoff matchup against a team missing their best players? The Wolves are probably going to play great, right? They're probably not going to play great because they're going to, I mean, unless I remind you that they lost to Austin Reeves' only led Laker team. Now, you can argue if you think Austin Reeves or LeBron James is a better basketball player at their current state. It's probably Austin, unfortunately. But
I would point out that they swept the Warriors last year after Steph got hurt.
They did. But there was more history with Jimmy and Draymond still there, right? I think they have more history with those.
Not
two
with the players. I remember
not those. Yeah, right.
I remember the players before that series. Like most players got asked about it, and they all went, "That wasn't me. Like I wasn't here."
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think in my head that Ant did it for Cat and the beef, and Draymond and Ant get into it sometimes. But whatever the case is that I'm
Draymond is a beef candidate for sure.
yeah. My point is that I feel like the Wolves seem to do better when like people are counting them out of a
Yeah,
series, and so maybe that's the reason I want
for
the
sure.
Nuggets. But as you said, anything can still happen. I mean, say everything's leading up to a 3-6 matchup, and then I'm not wishing this. I don't want to put that out there on any wishing on them. But if Jokic pulls up a little lame on his knee again, or Jamal Murray irks the back and he's out, and sudden you're playing Aaron Gordon and the Nuggets in the first round. Would you rather that, or would you rather play the LeBron Lakers in the first round? I mean, still probably the Lakers, but anything can happen, right? Like you said, between now and next week. So we'll see.
Yep, and probably important to point out, like the last two postseasons, the Wolves have limped to the finish line, at least in terms of um like potential matchup or whatever. They came into the matchup pretty sizable underdogs both of the last two seasons, and they're going to do that again this year, assuming the Nuggets keep the 3 seed. And they won both of those series in going 8-1 in those combined series. I think this will be even more of a test, and they probably deserve to be underdogs by a whatever margin. But I think there'll probably be a lot of negativity, assuming that the Wolves don't like win out or whatever, which I know they could do it. Their schedule's not that tough, especially if Houston wins their next two games and clinches whatever seed. Although Houston wins their next two games, they have a chance at the 4 seed, so that's probably not even worth debating.
Yeah.
One very, very small thing I would say is that if the Lakers have any chance of getting the 3 seed, they'll have to beat the Suns, and so if the Wolves can win enough games to eliminate the Suns from the top 6 sooner, maybe they punt that game to the Lakers. I don't know. The Wolves just have that's probably another important thing. The Wolves' magic number to clinch the top 6 is 2. They have to win. They go 2-2, they clinch. If they go 1-3 and Phoenix loses a game, they clinch. If they lose out and Phoenix goes 2-2, they clinch. Like it's still incredibly likely that the Wolves make the top 6, especially if they just Tuesday night against one of the worst teams in the league, Indiana, win that one, and like
that should do it.
Then you just need one more, and I mentioned the Lakers Suns. Maybe that's a game the Suns drop. So, for people dooming about going into the play-in, that's just not likely at all at this point. But 2 words to close it out. I wrote get healthy. That's going to be the focus of this week of Timberwolves basketball. I guess again Tuesday against Indiana is a must-win game. The Wolves are double-digit favorites. But just win a game or two, clinch the 6 seed, get some rest, and start figuring out what you're going to do potentially against Jokic.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hard to argue against that. That has to be priority number 1. So my 2 words are full game. FULL, full game. These games have been so hard to watch lately because I felt like all it takes is one bad quarter for the Wolves to completely melt down and for the game to go off the rails. If it was illustrated in a GIF, it would be the Office GIF of Jim in a snowball war with Dwight saying, "I just want it to stop." You look at this last week against Detroit. In the fourth quarter, they lost 28-34, which doesn't sound bad, but a lot of it was just kind of late game fouling to extend the game. Against Philly, it was the third quarter. They lost 24-42. And then against Charlotte, it was also the third quarter where they lost 19-34. So it just feels like the Wolves can't string together a full game. And a lot of it has to do with health, but a lot of it has to do with, as you say, focus or maybe just ability for them to focus. So whatever the case is, I just would like to see the Wolves play a full game so I could have at least one victory to watch and enjoy and, kind of use that as maybe some motivation going into the playoffs.
Absolutely. Well, the Wolves got one last back-to-back here this week. Tuesday in Indiana, Wednesday in Orlando. Hey, maybe you win both of those and you clinch your seed, and then you can let Houston grab a win or something. On Friday before KG returns to Target Center on Sunday in what is sure to be a very competitive game between the Wolves and the Pelicans. Not a game that both teams are indifferent about because the Pelicans don't have the, like, that's the thing. Like, it'd be almost more interesting if the Pelicans were trying to tank, but the Pelicans would probably, they don't need to win the game, but like, if you gave them a choice between winning or losing, they'd take a win, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And the Wolves are trending towards being in pretty much that exact same scenario. And there was a chance, like, if Ant had played enough games, or like, it's, well, Ant needs to play 15 minutes to get all NBA. It's like, well, then one player's playing at least a little bit. Yeah, so Kevin Garnett might return to a pretty ugly game at Target Center on Sunday. Maybe you're better off watching golf in the Masters that day. I don't know. But it'll at least be fun seeing KG back in the building before his jersey retirement next season. Leo, anything you got before we head out?
No, like I said, the top of the show, if you're still listening now, I mean, definitely tune in. The Minnesota Lynx will be having hopefully a fruitful free agency coming up this week. So there'll be a lot going on even outside the NBA. But yeah, just try and enjoy the ride. Honestly, that's the last thing I'm going to try and say here is that, I'm not always trying to be this guy, but in this point of the season, I will, is that like, hey, just try to enjoy the game, while there's out there, try to find some things to like have fun watching, because at the end of the day, this is basketball. Ryan and I cover the team, but we're also just fans, and watching basketball should be fun, not frustrating. So try and find whatever you can to enjoy it.
Absolutely. And if there was a chorus of people saying the same thing, maybe I'd tell you to find some more negativity, but certainly it's the other way around. You got plenty of people, myself included, willing to rip into them. But yeah, I'll be back later this week after the back-to-back with another guest. And then Leo and I will be back after the regular season ends next week to discuss their potential playoff matchup. Almost certainly the Nuggets, but I guess we'll see on that. But for Leo, I'm Ryan. Thank you everyone for listening.
Get home and drive safe.
Go Wolves.
Hey, you!